All right, you guys, it's your boy Jalen with another video. I need to come with another freaking intro or something, because with another video it's so played out. But this, um, I guess you can say the idea behind this video is again Mark Fisher. Now we've covered his ideas behind capitalist realism, but we have not covered hauntology, which is sort of like this longing for promises that were given within the neoliberal moment, but have not really been able to be realized. And so they exist in like this sort of phantom state, right? And, those ideas and, these words can sort of be mysterious in the mind, but when you really think about them in reality, at least in the context of my generation, Gen Z, it's pretty easy to understand, especially when you really look at like the trends in art and things that we like, despite the incongruency that these trends take place in within history and within the moment. So when we look at Gen Z hauntology, which Gen Z hauntology is primarily composed of a early 2000s hauntology. And, within this hauntology, or at least I guess you can say the form of hauntology that I find myself mostly thinking about is like that arrow. I talked about this like on Reddit, like the Fruitature arrow, like PS Vita, PSP, that real slick sort of technological aesthetic that the early 2000s had. And, along with that, you have the music genres. You have, you've got hard style. Um, you have that moment. You have the moment of dubstep, which, a lot of people, cringed out on dubstep, but, now, and here come the mosquitoes. Looks like I'm gonna have to start moving around, guys. But now that, we're in 2026, a lot of those 2010s to like around like that sort of UKF sound came around like around like 2008 to like 2013. That was probably like its peak. A lot of us missed that sound, despite us, back then calling it cringe. When we're in the moment of time that we're in now, we kind of missed that sound, and that sound is sort of replaying over and over and over again. I talked about that in my capitalist realism video, where hardstyle has this revival where essentially, hardstyle is coming back, but it's not a new sound. It's just early 2000s hardstyle repeating itself within 2026. It's repeating itself in a point in time that it doesn't belong. It's repeating itself in a point in time where something emergent and something new should occur, but it can't occur because we're stuck on this nostalgia for that sound. And the thing with early 2000s hauntology versus other forms of hauntology is that, for, let's just say, like a person like, in Gen X, in Gen X, a lot of the aesthetic within Gen X, it manifested. They could say like, I missed this, and this. But within history, they can say that that happened. Or, for the boomer, which, it could be kind of controversial. They could say, I miss playing or being with my grandparents or my parents on the farm or something like that, right? That happened. But the thing with Gen Z hauntology is that the aesthetic that the hauntology is comprised of never manifested itself, right? Like fruits at your arrow, like that combination of nature and technology didn't really happen. And, you know, with it occurring in the context that it is now with data centers, it's occurring in its most horrifying and grotesque form. It didn't really happen in the way that we thought it would. And one meme and one saying that always occurs with that aesthetic that you'll see a lot of times is the future that we were promised. It's the future that we were promised, but it never happened. But for the hauntologies of previous generations, the future that they're nostalgizing for was promised to them. It happened. It shouldn't happen again, but at least it did happen. But the future that, we thought that we would have, as Gen Z, as millennials, I guess you could say, but primarily Gen Z, let's be honest, that didn't occur. The technological utopia, the the interesting new ways of going about the world, it didn't occur. The only thing that did occur was essentially technology not being used as new ways of exploring the environment, but as supplanting the environment and supplanting the individual. And the access to this, expansive technological society, it doesn't occur in a way to where, it's free and society and humanity experiments with it. It occurs in a sense to where you have to give up your freedom to it. Instead of exploring freedom, you're giving it up. So it's it's very it's a very terrifying and uncomfortable dilemma. And I find myself a lot of times, like, I was listening to I listen to hardstyle too, despite the fact that I don't like the revivalism behind a lot of these genres. And it's not just hardstyle, like even like what is it? Darn. It's on the tip of my tongue. Like new metal with Deftones and all that other sorts of stuff, like those sounds coming back. I listen to those sounds, but I don't like the fact that I listen to those sounds because, it's sort of defeatist in a sense. It's defeatist in a sense. It's like, I don't really like, essentially it's like saying, I like this time in the past in contrast to the time that I'm in now. And, if listening to this music, I'm reminded of, whatever happens from here on out just isn't going to be worth it, or it's just going to be boring, and, it's just not going to live up to the hype of what, the peak of music was, which is what I'm hearing right now in this track. So, hauntology in that form can function in a form of a trauma, to where you're uncomfortable with the implications behind what's occurring, but you just can't help yourself due to how pleasurable the feeling is. A lot of us have really good memories of the PS Vita and PSP age. A lot of us had many good memories of all of the designs that happened back then, and the futurism behind the early 2000s. But it literally didn't happen compared to the hauntologies, like I said, of other generations. Like, we're just sitting here with you know, our dicks out, and we just then got played or whatever. So with escaping hauntology, with going about facilitating an emergence of new cultures and like sort of just new ways of being, despite the being that we long for, um, that's blocked off by capitalist realism. Is blocked off by the only way that we can think about a way of being is one that involves capital, one that involves the continuation of more productivity, but not really um, a being that is primarily focused on the existential or the ontological. And I say ontological just to be more inclusive. I want to say spiritual, but I think a lot of people might not like that. So I'm gonna just stick to like ontology, really. So that's what I was thinking about. I was thinking about just the hauntological experience of Gen Z and how capitalist realism has just kept us trapped, listening to freaking Deftones, Slow Dive, hardstyle tracks, same old pop music, same old electric sound, over and over and over and over again till the end of time. That's just what it's going to be from here on out. But anyways, it's your boy signing out. Peace.